Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update. So we've actually got quite a bit to cover here. Up until basically I think yesterday, I felt like, oh, I'm going to have to do a really light news video here. But a bunch of stuff I think has come together to make some interesting stuff. So straight away, finding a new book is of course obviously a pretty exciting thing. So this is I Am Toph. This is the fourth I Am Little Golden book after I Am Aang, I Am Zuko, and the upcoming I Am Katara. So it is confirmed the fourth one is going to be Toph. So again, standard stuff, coming January 7th, 2025. So it is going to be a relatively big gap between the June release here for the Katara book and the January release for the Toph book. But nice to see them continuing this. I'd be very interested to see what they do after this in terms of, like, do they go to Sokka? Do they switch over to Korra? Do they view it as like, well, if we can we just keep going through every single character? Is it going to get a bit repetitive after a certain point? But still, I like these as kind of small, cheap books, but the art is really, really good. Like, I'm actually really excited for next month. Obviously, I Am Katara coming out, so I'll get this book. I'll do a quick review up on the channel to show off some of this stuff. It's always exciting from that point of view. Yes, there's no real new content in it outside of the art, but they're fun little releases, I think. So nothing much else to say about the Toph book. We get a bit of a description here. You know, born into a wealthy family, 12-year-old Toph Beifong was expected to become a young woman of society. No one expected was that she would become one of the best earthbenders in the Four Nations. Follow Toph's journey from competing in earthbending rumbles in secret as the Blind Bandit to traveling the world as the Avatar's earthbending master. So, yeah, pretty solid stuff there. Definitely one to keep an eye out for. It seems to be our first, like, properly locked in 2025 book release, so something to check out. A bit of a reminder on this one. This is not new. I covered this in a video back in January, but even I forgot about it when I did my review earlier on in the week for Heart of a Hero. So I talked about what would I like to see next from that publisher, and I was like, hey, if they did a Korra one, that would be kind of cool, without realizing that actually they had kind of half, put up a listing suggesting a Korra Heart of a Hero. Again, weird thing about this where you can't just find this listing by searching. You have to go to Heart of a Hero and look at the related products, and this is one of them. Again, weirdness because it's got a 4th of May 2027 release date. There's no real proper description about it other than Kat Zhang, the writer on Heart of a Hero, also seems to be behind this. No artist currently attached. But it is, hardcover picture book, 40 pages, same pricing as Heart of a Hero. It does have the kind of marketing kind of text, key selling points, but it does seem to be like 3 years old. It talks about the Netflix series likely coming in 2022. It talks about new stuff and publishing happening in 2021. As in, like, it's about to happen. So it does very much feel like a placeholder thing, in that I'd be super surprised if the plan is actually for this book to come out in 2027. So whenever maybe they get around to properly announcing this, I'm guessing this might end up more being a book perhaps for next year, but it's just something to keep an eye out for, to see what exactly the plan is. Maybe it is part of some strategy to, hey, this will be a Korra book to release alongside an Avatar project in 2027. But it seems super early to do that with this sort of thing. So I do think it is probably just a placeholder. But that's just a reminder. Continuing on the book trend, we have this. Avatar The Last Airbender 18-book box set. And obviously, as you can see when you zoom in here, it's a box set of the comics. And you can see it is The Promise Part 1, 2, 3. and it's the individual parts of all of the 6 Avatar comic trilogies. So The Promise, The Search, The Rift, Smoke and Shadow, North and South, and Imbalance. Now, it's obviously different if you're familiar with all the editions, because I assume you probably are if you've seen my videos recently going over how to get into the books. This is effectively a new release. Now, note, it is not from Dark Horse. This is a specific release from the Australian publisher of the Avatar comics, and that is Scholastic Australia. And that is the way Australia have always done their releases. You can see here they have the Scholastic logo down here on the spines rather than like a Dark Horse logo, just highlighting that, hey, it's from a different publisher. And yeah, the spines are different in terms of the colors, because that's just how Scholastic did their releases. We are obviously doing this right now in Dark Horse with the one-shot comics. You'll note they all have differently colored spines. They did it from the start with the standard comics as well. Now, I do think it's a bit of a weird product, because Australia have also got their own releases of the omnibus editions, which again are pretty much the same. I don't think the Australian editions of the omnibus use the spine image along the spines. I think they just have colored patterns on it, so it's a bit different. But my question is, why did they go for an 18-book box set using the individual parts versus a 6-book box set of the 6 omnibus editions? I think that just seems like the more effective way to release them, where it's a box set of 6 books rather than a box set of 18 books. I get in terms of thickness, you know, obviously the 18-book set is going to be thicker just because you have so many covers, and the cover's obviously thicker than the actual pages, but it's not going to be like massively bigger, but it's still an interesting choice here. Obviously there's not too much details about it. Like, literally the only description on the few websites I've seen this listed on is just like, hey, Avatar's back. The only picture is this one shot, and it's out on the 1st of June, so it's only like what, 3 weeks away. So not sure what the situation is here. Personally, I don't think it's the most interesting collection of the comics. Obviously, if you're in Australia and don't have the comics, this is a nice way to get the main run of the 6 kind of trilogies. But I would find this very difficult to recommend collectors, fans, grab this as like an extra copy of the books. Just because if you're not in Australia, it's going to be probably hard to grab this for a reasonable price, just with like probably what shipping is going to be depending on where you are. And like I said, the only real difference here is that the spines are going to be slightly different colors. You're going to have different kind of Dark Horse logos replaced with Scholastic logos. Sure, the actual box could be kind of interesting, but I look at the cover of the box here, and it comes across to me as very generic. Interesting, and I think a bit weird. They're just using a very stock image of Aang that we know very well from recent products, and it's not a comic image on the front of the comic collection. Now, maybe the back cover has something different. Maybe the actual spine of the box itself has something interesting going on. Otherwise, it comes across as very standard Avatar graphic format for, like, basically since, like, 2020, 2021. Nothing particularly interesting here, but like I said, an option for people in Australia, and I suppose the most hardcore of hardcore collectors. But for me, as someone who has multiple editions of the comics, this is not something I am going to be looking into grabbing, just because there's not enough new here to in any way justify it for me. Next one here is just a quick update. Avatar Studios have actually done an update on their website. It's very minor, just so you're clear. Nothing here, but in the Discover More section, you'll see here, they have the same Korra one, the same music from the animated series one, but they've replaced the Legacy of Yang Chen thing about the novels with a link to the Reckoning of Roku novels. So when you click on this, it just directs you to, I think, the Barnes & Noble page for ordering a copy of Reckoning of Roku. Next up, they've replaced the Quest for Balance tile with Avatar coming to Roblox, which I think is it this month or next month? But anyway, that's a thing that's happening, of course, and that's it. They still haven't added in anything about the comics, which is, I think, especially weird because, of course, The Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer is coming out like a week. Well, sorry, it's more like 2 weeks after The Reckoning of Roku. So, kind of weird that there's still nothing on that here. And then there's still nothing on the website talking about the new movies. It doesn't mention anything about the recent announcements of the date change or the fact that we have voice actors. There's still absolutely no mention at all that Avatar Studios exists to make new content. They continue to recommend you sign up for the newsletter, but I've been checking, and I think I've only received one Avatar-focused newsletter from Paramount, and that was talking about the Avatar in Concert World Tour. Nothing has ever... I've never got a thing suggesting anything about new Avatar content beyond the concert. Moving on. Bit of an update here. We've kind of been wondering for a while now, like, oh, it's been quite a while since the release of the Book 1 vinyl. What's happening with the Book 2 vinyl, especially with like the world tour, the concert stuff happening, and like obviously the concert has tracks from Book 1, 2, and 3. So that suggests some of the Book 2 stuff is already done. What's happening with the other releases, basically? Because we're also expecting to get through these releases so we can get around to doing Korra soundtrack releases, which at least when we first heard about this stuff seemed like it was very much on the table. So some people, of course, asked, Book 2 tracks when, and someone got an answer here. When is the Book 2 soundtrack coming, my man? I'll pay whatever you're asking for those tunes. And Jeremy Zuckerman replies, officially here, soon-ish. So at least it's acknowledging that, hey, the next release is actually happening. I'm guessing that suggests it is at least being worked on. And we're going to build up to some sort of a release. I'm guessing this is probably going to line up reasonably well to be like roughly like once a year at roughly the same time of the year. So we'll see what happens there. And then just note this Instagram post as well, because you can win a signed copy of this, of course. So it's signed by Jeremy Zuckerman, Mike and Brian, and there's a link in his bio to how you can enter the contest. So I'll include a link, like I always include the sources and stuff like that down below. But that's interesting. That's promising. That was an exciting part of last year, and it's going to be exciting to get the Book 2 soundtrack now as well. Now for the last news topic, and straight away I want to make it super clear, this is a rumor. This is not even from a sort of known kind of leaker or anything like that. This has just kind of come out of nowhere and is more interesting just from the perspective of like, hey, it's talking about a new Avatar game and, let's see what happens here. But just be clear, it's a rumor, massive, massive pinch of salt here. But let's go. So the original source on this is 4chan, and this Reddit post here on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit just compiles a lot of the information together about what is known. Again, no visuals, no titles, it's just some very broad information giving a few suggestions about potentially what a new Avatar game might actually be. We do know Avatar Studios is working on Avatar video games. Of course, the mobile games, Quest for Balance had happened, but based on like what Avatar News had said previously as well, other games are in development as well. Gaming is also a part of what Avatar Studios is working on. Brian Konietzko confirmed that in an interview that they did on a podcast a while ago at this point, but mentioned multiple games as being a thing. So the whole thing here is basically, someone again is in IT, I guess, and found out some of this information. So straight away, the idea seems to be, I'll just go straight to the kind of like quote stuff here, I suppose. An Avatar game that's been in the works since 2021, which makes sense. Avatar Studios formed in 2021, so it would make sense that a more notable game for Avatar would start, development in this year, because of course it was announced. Avatar Studios was announced February 2021, so it would make sense maybe towards the end of 2021, this game went into development. It does, of course, suggest that this game has been in development for the last 3 years and probably will still be another maybe year or so in development, given that nothing's been announced about it. So at least it seems like they're getting time to make something kind of interesting. It is not a AAA game with AAA books, since the relevant players weren't able to convince their boards a project on a Nickelodeon cartoon was worth it. So they're being smart with their money. Some people may think this is a good thing. So this is the always debate that happens with Avatar games is, why can't we just get this massive giant Avatar game that I've dreamt of for 20 years? Well, the idea obviously is that to a certain degree Avatar is unproven as a massive video game seller to justify a project that big. With how big the budgets of AAA games are, does Avatar command that budget right now? I think we all kind of in our hearts sort of know that if they delivered a really strong Avatar game that they put time, money, effort into, it would do very well because Avatar is very popular. But the timing, I could see maybe from a business perspective, isn't quite where it needs to be. Maybe they're thinking a little bit in this direction after the success of Netflix Avatar from like a business perspective, but it's probably going to take until Avatar Studios releasing the movie, series, and that stuff doing well, like the franchise becoming bigger than it already is, to justify it getting a mega budget for a big game that's super, super ambitious. So the fact that they kind of know straight away maybe that it's not AAA, but they're trying to do what they can, they're being smart with the money and focusing on what they can do, is hopefully good. Because you look at something like, say, Quest for Balance, and it ultimately is even though it's a kind of boring premise of just retelling ATLA, telling 61 episodes in a game is a daunting task, and that game pretty much failed very badly at retelling the story of ATLA. It was too large in scope for what that game project actually was. So the hope here is, of course, that they have the scope of this game in a way where they can make the most of the budget that they actually do have. As of writing, it's an original story set between The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, with original characters and very few characters from the show with any major role. The goal is to not simply retell the story of the cartoon to gain some legitimacy beyond it, as this is not the only thing beyond cartoons Avatar Studios has planned, but that's public information. So that makes sense, tying it into Avatar Studios, the idea of, well, they're trying to do stuff that's not just retelling ATLA, so of course other projects like games also should be, filling in their little gaps, telling their own original stories. That's really good to hear if this turns out to actually be real and stuff like that. That's an interesting place to fit a game. It's a relatively unexplored period for Avatar. It's obviously a one that we're excitedly awaiting to be explored. And obviously the first movie is going to be Aang and co older in this time period. But the game apparently is going to be an original story in this time period. Now, keep in mind, that gap period is very long. It is 70 years. So are we talking about, is Korra the Avatar here, or is Aang still the Avatar? Or is there that little gap period where we don't really have the Avatar, like the 4 years before Korra is discovered as the Avatar, of course, after Aang's death? That could be an interesting gap to set it in. That's a way to kind of make it be like, okay, if it's set there, no Avatar's really involved, it's too early to include a lot of the main Korra cast, and a lot of the ATLA cast would still be older, but because the Aang isn't around, you can focus on different things because a lot of the main players aren't really around anymore. That could be an interesting thing, but my guess probably would be somewhere pretty solidly in the middle of this, where probably to a certain degree trying to maybe line up with the movie. It's set in roughly the same time period, but more maybe set up for other stuff going on in the era. Again, they say the main characters won't have a major role, but this is the idea of, like, with Zuko as the Fire Lord. Like, you'd expect he'd get mentioned, you'd see him a little bit, the Avatar would get acknowledged, that sort of thing. It's just that the whole story is not going to include Aang, Zuko as main characters, so That's interesting. Art style, as of my info, seems to mix realism with the show's art style because they don't have the money to go full on with realism, but major changes have been made last I heard. Now, obviously that's a bit of a vague statement. What exactly does that mean? What does realism graphics mean, especially in relation to Avatar? Because at least to me, I would always associate, like, if you're doing an Avatar game, that you would want the game to sort of look like the show art style to a certain degree. So having it be show art style graphics makes sense. Kind of similar to other games, just like obviously like better, not more nicely done. Realism, I guess, what is leaning away from maybe the cartoon aesthetic, which, you know, it is something that's definitely an option. But I guess the idea here is that it's a more difficult prospect because you have to put a lot more time into developing a unique art style, and maybe from a budget perspective, they're maybe still trying to figure that out. One of the concepts was the story of a Fire Nation general rising up the ranks and then being punched down a peg, a la Napoleon. But that was in the brainstorming phase, so who knows? That is an interesting potential idea of, like, potentially like the villain of the story is a Fire Nation general getting into a good position, but then maybe trying to like overthrow Zuko or something like that, and your characters, the new characters, are trying to sort of stop him. That's certainly an interesting threat that you could do, and like maybe the game is a Fire Nation focused game, so maybe that's why maybe the Team Avatar doesn't come into play. But interesting. Among the reference material for this game is the Darth Vader introduction and boss fight in Jedi Fallen Order. So not sure what to make of that, but I guess that would maybe suggest the idea of like, okay, there's going to be boss fights, and they want to do it in a way where it's maybe not the full combat system of Jedi Fallen Order, but it's resembling it to a certain degree, and that's a good combat system. And I think that could work very well for Avatar. And then the poster here on Reddit asks the person who has the actual information on Reddit if it's like Quest for Balance at all. And the response is that he claims it's more sophisticated than Quest for Balance, but adds that the circumstances could potentially force the team to push out shovelware, which he said would greatly upset them. So it seems like the trajectory of the game is that they're trying to not make this be a, you know, disappointing Avatar game like the kind of last couple have kind of been. They're trying to make this something more unique and different. But the possibility potentially remains that they could be rushed to just push out something that is just like Quest for Balance. Not great, but it doesn't maybe seem like they're at that point just yet. But also at the same time, you have to acknowledge there's nothing super clear here from this information. This is still rather vague, and I would say the main thing of focus here is just the idea of, okay, a game between The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. Okay. Yes, that's what I'm looking for from games. I'm super glad if this is true and it's not just going to be another attempt at adapting Avatar. This is exactly what we need, where even if the game doesn't turn out to be amazing, there's at least a reason to play it because there's some new story content in here that's, because of their choosing a setting, is going to be canon. But of course, make of this what you will. It's obviously just early rumors, and we have to wait for an announcement, of course. So don't read into it too much, but interesting to think about. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on all of the news that I covered in this video. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.